All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Engling, and on behalf of the Teaching and Technology Collaborative, I'd like to welcome you all to the 22nd Annual Enriching Scholarship Conference. We really appreciate you being here today, so thank you for that. Whenever I talk to anybody about the Enriching Scholarship Conference, one of the first questions that always comes up is, how long has the conference been around? And 22 years is a long time. And when I say that, it's, usually kind of a moment of wow, because a lot has changed. It's been a very consistent thing here on campus. We bring together a lot of people and just a lot of information to share. A couple weeks ago, I was talking with somebody who did an article on the program in the Record, and he's part of the public engagement track, and he was telling me about what they were doing over in the business school. They do this, he was talking about this real-life simulation that they do. It's done in real time, makes use of technology, uses a lot of social media part of it, and the students are really engaged with it. It's like a couple-day activity. And well, first off, I was thinking, I want to take this kind of course, because that sounded really, really exciting to me to be able to have that sort of environment. But then the second part of it is I'm thinking, well, how can I bring something like that to my own instruction? I do a lot with helping providers learn how to use the electronic health record. I'm like, is there a way that I could do some sort of really engaging, real-time activity with them? I don't know, maybe it's possible, but it got me thinking. And ultimately, that's what I feel Enriching Scholarship's all about. Finding what's happening somewhere else on campus. How can I take that and bring that back to my own instruction? You're going to hear about things that you might not hear. You might see something that you use every day, but used in a completely different way. Those are the types of things that we're really trying to encourage here and help the kind of knowledge that we're trying to spread. So if there's anything that I can impart on you, it's that I hope that you have moments like those throughout your sessions that you go through today. Make those connections, talk with the presenters, talk with the people in the classes, share that knowledge, and let's just see what else we can do, because that's where all the innovation truly happens. So a couple things about this year's conference. So one of the big things that I'm really excited about is this is the first time that we are offering online courses as a part of Enriching Scholarship. And we don't have one, but we actually have 3 this year. One of them is done synchronously through Blue Jeans, and we have 2 asynchronous courses that you can sign up for. So we're really appreciative to the presenters who put together those activities for everybody out there. So hopefully, if you're going to be taking those programs, let us know how it goes. We're expanding our community out a little bit here today. So this year, in the audience today, we have a group of faculty and faculty developers from the Chinese University who are attending the CRLT Institute for Faculty Development and Innovative Pedagogy. It's a joint collaboration between the University of Michigan and the Shanghai Jiangtao University for enhancing faculty training and development for improving the quality of undergraduate education. Today, the keynote is going to be simultaneously translated to assist their full participation in today's session, because if you got your clickers, it's going to be an engaging session today. Also in the audience, we have 2 faculty members from the Makari University in Uganda who are here to learn more about the U of M program and events that support and enhance faculty and training. So we appreciate our international community coming out and taking part in today's event. Thank you for being here. I also want to take a moment to recognize that the 100 presenters that are taking part in this week's sessions, they brought together 90 different sessions for the university community to take part in. So we really appreciate all of you doing that, because without you, we really wouldn't have a conference. So we appreciate everyone being here and taking part of that. I'd also like to recognize the folks of the Enriching Scholarship Planning Committee. So if you can take a moment to raise your hand, stand up, or do something to make yourself known. These are folks from all around campus, from all the different schools, way in the back there, different schools. We get together, we meet monthly and throughout the entire year to bring this event as well as other events around on campus. So we want to take a moment just to recognize all of them, because there's a lot of love and dedication in this group, especially for this event and for teaching with technology. Thank you to all of you. It's nice working with all of you. All right, so let's go ahead and get things underway here. So at this time, I'd like to welcome James Hilton, the Vice Provost for Academic Innovation and University Librarian and Dean in the Libraries and Professor of Information, to present this TIP Awards this year. James, thank you.
Good morning. So I have to tell you, I was walking over here today and I was going, I am so happy. And I was going like, why am I so happy? And I came up with at least 3 reasons. First, I will not lie. It finally feels like spring is here, like unambiguously here, which doesn't mean there won't still be a little more pain, but unambiguously made it to spring. So that's one. The second is Enriching Scholarship. Every year, this event, I think I've been here since the beginning, every year, to me, this event, which is a celebration of all the things that are best about a university community, that discovers, learns, teaches, works together, that's what Enriching Scholarship embeds and represents. So that's the second reason. And the third is because I get to present, on behalf of the provost, the Teaching Innovation Prizes to 5 teams, 5 projects that are really spectacular and, again, to me, the tip of the iceberg of the activity and stuff that's going on. I think I've tried saying this in various ways in different times, so this time I'll just say it as pithily as possible. It is an amazing time to be at Michigan if you have a passion for teaching and learning. It just feels different. It feels, to me at least, like we live in a world of possibility, not threat, possibility and excitement. And that's something I think to be relished. And I think the tip prizes are just sort of a good way of sort of bookmarking that. My job is going to be to try to provide very inadequate, brief overviews of the projects, with people running the program emphasizing brief overviews of the program. I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit about each of the projects, and we'll applaud, but we'll have people stay seated. We'll do quick acknowledgement through them, and then at the end I'll ask everybody to come up and we'll acknowledge them all and celebrate. And your job is, if you really want to know more about them, find one of these people and find out more about their project, because, like I said, it's going to be brief. Okay, so, perfect. Nothing like that. The beauty about when you use technology is it works flawlessly every time.
Sorry.
What did I do wrong?
I think you clicked on something.
I clicked on some. Well, yeah, probably. Here, I got it. Go. That one. Okay, not that one. Okay, we're good. Got it. Okay, so. There we go. The first award goes to Matthew Deemer, Professor of Education, for a project entitled Advancing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion via Advanced Quantitative Courses. Matt joined U of M in the Methodology and Research on Diversity and Equity Cluster Hire in 2015. And I point that out because it is clearly making the efficacy, he and his work are clearly making the efficacy of that hire manifest. So something to be celebrated independent. Recognized today for the consistent and innovative ways he foregrounds considerations of race, ethnicity, gender, and social class in all of his classes. That's particularly notable because many tend to assume that quantitatively oriented courses, numbers, are infertile grounds. Infertile, hard, impossible, you name it, grounds for considerations of DE&I. Matt's work invalidates those assumptions. His doctoral courses like psychometrics and structural equation modeling foreground perspectives of underrepresented scholars in course reading lists, harness advanced methods of precise estimates of racial bias and items making up different assessment models, as opposed to just saying noise in the system, measurement error, exposes students to rigorous principles of diversity in science. In addition, his teaching is grounded in STEM research that shows students to be most motivated when groups they represent appear in course materials. Teachers hold high expectations, and students feel their input is valued. So in his classes, often reluctant statistics students turn into data geeks, in the best sense of the word geeks, turn into data geeks who tackle questions of social justice in ways that are authentic and productive, leading to grants, published papers, and quantitative-oriented faculty positions. Please join me in congratulating Matt. Next up, Gus Everard, Arthur F. Thurnow Professor and Professor of Physics and Astronomy for a project entitled Problem Roulette, a stress-free practice zone supports student success. I might quibble with stress-free, stress-reduced, maybe, but stress-free. So this is a project that actually started in 2011. And it started with a couple of observations. So Gus and one of your graduate students at the time, really, right, started creating a repository of problems that students could do. One of the things that they discovered was that the Greek societies were, we would call it collaborating today. We're collaborating to amass great troves of test questions from a variety of courses. And one of the things that just seemed not fair to have differentially accessible practice, we'll call them, tests for students. So they started working on putting together a repository of problems. And I think there are a couple of things that were really interesting about it. One is, these are largely for large introductory courses. If you teach those courses, you know that there are all kinds of practice questions out there. Textbook publishers give them, they're all over the place. The thing that was different about these is, much like the files that the Greek societies were collecting, these were authentic questions, meaning they're the questions that the faculty here thought were the relevant ones, and it has a different impact. So they wanted to make it equally accessible. They also wanted to provide the opportunity for people to practice in a relatively stress-free environment, and in the most recent versions have created a moderately stressful environment where people can go in and actually they can choose whether they want to just practice the problems or whether they want to take a simulated test and take it under timed conditions. It won academic innovation funding in 2016, which enabled the introduction and entirely refactoring services in 2017, started in Physics 140 in 2011. It now supports 11 courses with total enrollments of over 12,000 students per year. And it's looking to expand to other institutions via the seismic collaboration, Sloan Equity and Inclusion in STEM introductory courses. So it's always hard with these kinds of things where people get to choose whether they want to participate in the tool or not. It's always hard to tell whether it's a selection problem or not, but it is worth noting that students who regularly use this tool get roughly a quarter letter grade higher than light users. So it also generates rich and intriguing data about students' behavior and performances. So, for example, data from Problem Roulette suggests that there are no gender differences in the practices. Gender differences do emerge in testing situations, which would point to looking maybe at the conditions of the test and the testing context rather than the problems themselves. Anyway, please join. It's a terrific project. Please join me in congratulating Gus. Next up is Liz Gerber, the Jack L. Walker Jr. Collegiate Professor of Public Policy for Viewpoint, Simulating Decision Makers' Choices in Classrooms and Online. So this is another case where this is a use of technology that helps somebody do something they were already doing, but do it in a way that both scales and ideally also reduces stress. This time with Liz, reduces stress on the instructor more than the student. So Liz in her public policy courses, has used simulations for a long time. Those simulations usually involved a lot of paper, assigning roles, handing them out, created so when you teach large classes, there are days that are relatively low stress, and then there are days that you know are going to be potentially chaotic, and what I think of as, high impact days. And high impact means if they go well, they really go well, and if they go badly, they don't go really well. So Liz started talking with folks about the possibility of creating a simulation that would allow people to role play using cloud-based software to help us include a broader range of instructors and students. So it starts with Liz's class, but Viewpoint starts to become a simulation engine that can be actually adapted for all kinds of things. The trajectory was 3 years in development in partnership with AI designers, programs, and behavioral scientists. Particularly, nothing like being inconsistent with how you handle paper. It's been used 24 times in 7 different institutions so far, in group sizes ranging from 12 to 164. The software allows students to be assigned different roles. It allows the instructor to intervene at different points. It provides tools for communications, meetings, back channel. It tries to simulate, for example, how would you proceed with NAFTA negotiations if you were trying to, just hypothetically speaking, redo NAFTA. It's proposed for use in online courses currently in social work and public health in the summer and fall of 2019, respectively. The most interesting thing to me, we were talking about Viewpoint with the executive officers and the president a couple of months ago, and the CIO immediately said, oh, I want to use that tool, warning, I want to use that tool to simulate a security event at Michigan and have the EOs run through it and everything. So please join me in congratulating Liz Gerber. Next is Ann Geer, Arthur F. Thurnau Professor and Professor of English Language and Literature and of Education, and Ginger Schultz, Assistant Professor of Chemistry, for MWrite, Making Writing to Learn Pedagogies Practical and Sustainable. I think for everybody who's taught really large courses, the hope for this project is enormous. Because all the data show that writing to learn, as opposed to writing to communicate, writing to publish, writing to understand, writing to learn pedagogies have an enormous impact on students' comprehension and engagement with the course. The challenge, of course, if you teach a really large course, is how would you ever scale a writing-intensive course, even if the purpose of that writing is mostly learning? You still have to have mechanisms for providing feedback. So feedback through MWrite is provided from automated peer reviews that are integrated into Canvas. The Sweetland Center for Writing trains a corps of undergraduate writing fellows who serve as liaisons between the students and the faculty. Sweetland also hosts an engaged learning seminar giving faculty time and support to develop effective writing prompts and assignments. And actually, as an aside, I would say one of the things that almost all of these projects have in common is they provide an opportunity to reimagine, rethink, be intentional, often in ways that are fun. Oh, I've used technology once or twice. Often in ways that are intentional and engaging for faculty, right? Sweetland hosts an engaged learning seminar giving faculty time to support it. The trajectory of this particular project, it received in 2015, it received funding from the Third Century Initiative. In 2016, it joined the Digital Innovation Greenhouse project in the Office of Academic Innovation. 2017 was the inaugural seminar for faculty preparing to teach in the fall of 2018. And fall of 2018, 24 undergraduates joined the Writing Fellows Program. Currently active courses, fall of 2018, we're in spring now. Fall of 2018, active courses included Econ 101, Stats 250, Physics 140, Climate 102, ME 235, and ALA 106. Again, benefits of the MRITE for students in these large introductory courses include deep conceptual learning, improved self-efficacy, improved scientific reasoning, and remediation of misconceptions about content. What more could you ask for? Please join me in congratulating Anne and And last but not least, Stephanie Tharp, Associate Professor of Art and Design, and Eric Svan, Lecturer in Business, for Design Charrette, Hacking Health Through Community Engagement, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. So this project, as innovation really borrows from, builds upon, has as its core, the Charrette workshop concept from architectural and design practices, and embeds it in a team-based integrated product development course. Hosted by the Tauber Institute for Global Operations, it serves students from Ross, Stamps, College of Engineering, and the School of Information. So what is a design charrette? A design charrette is an intensive interdisciplinary workshop that convenes students, faculty, researchers, health practitioners, and community members from a target population to address a problem area. In 2017-18, the topic was health for senior adults. In 2018 and 19, the topic was health for pre-adolescent children. And if you see his poster at the back, you see these great photos from the charrette. And Eric and I were talking right beforehand, and to put words in your mouth, he said, I'm doubling down. I would never do this differently now, that this is the way to approach, especially things that are design intensive. So the charrette creates an immersive learning experience focused on human-centered design by helping students deeply understand other people's lives, their needs, values, mindsets, and lived experience. It's interesting to note that the Integrated Product Development course, which is part of, won an inaugural Provost Teaching Innovation Prize in 2009. So lightning does sometimes strike twice. So please join me in congratulating Stephanie and Eric.
Okay. Congratulations to all the winners on that. All right, so just a really quick logistical thing for for this week's sessions. Just first off, there's a reminder that all of the sessions this week, they start on time. Michigan time is no more, so if you're presenting, please be cognizant of that. And then just remember, all the sessions start on time. Also, if you are on a wait list for one of the sessions, we do encourage you to, if you're able to, go to that session anyway. Often there is space available in the sessions, so if you're on a wait list and it's one you really want to do, we definitely encourage you to head on out to it. And then lastly, just a quick reminder too, they're passing out the clickers right now to return those clickers when you leave today. We really appreciate getting all those back, so we appreciate that. So I'll give them a moment to pass those out. All right, and so now the moment you've all come here waiting for today. So at this time, I'd just like to talk about Sandra Janssen-McGuire. She is the Director Emerita for the Louisiana State University Center for Academic Success and the retired Assistant Advanced Chancellor for Professor of Chemistry, and she is an internationally recognized chemical educator, author, and lecturer. She has traveled the globe promoting surefire strategies to help students, including those underrepresented in science and math professions, to be successful in their coursework and their careers, and she has delivered keynote addresses or presented workshops to over 400 institutions. Her book, Teaching Students How to Learn, Strategies You Can Incorporate into Any Course to Improve Student Metacognition, Study Skills, and Motivation, was released in 2015 and is a Stylus Publishing bestseller. The student version of her book, Teach Yourself How to Learn, was released in January of 2018. A few of her most recent accolades include the 2019 Distinguished Lecturer Award from the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development, She also received the 2019 Commitment to Excellence in Academic Support Award from the Commission for Academic Support in Higher Education. And then also, back in 2007, she received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring, which was presented to her at a White House Oval Office ceremony back then. So to add to that list, she is here today presenting her talk, Metacognition, the Key to Equity and Excellence for All Students. At this time, we'd like to please welcome Dr. Sandra McGuire. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me turn this on. I'm going to use the handheld. Testing, testing, sound good? Okay. Yes, well, I am really, really pleased to be here. I want to thank the committee for inviting me, and I want to thank Vice Provost Hilton for having a little bit of trouble with the technology so that if I have to call people, if I have to call someone up here, you will have seen this before. But no, we are going to be using iClickers, and I've never used iClickers before, but because this is a technology conference, I figured I would use iClickers. And but the tech people are standing ready to rescue me at any point if need be. But this is actually, I love coming to Michigan. This is my 6th trip, I think, within the last 7 years or so. Different groups have invited me, and every time I come, I am really excited about the kinds of things that you're doing here to improve teaching, to improve learning. And so what we're going to talk about this morning are topics and really concepts that I didn't know, I knew very little about as recently as about 15 years ago. Or I'm not 20, I guess. And I had been teaching chemistry, before I got to LSU, I'd been teaching chemistry for about 30 years. And then I was at LSU for 10 years, and I was at Cornell University prior to coming to LSU. And when I was at Cornell, I didn't know most of the things that we're going to talk about this morning. I didn't know that it was possible to have a student who's failing a course 1 week, and then 3 weeks later, they're making 90s and 100s in that course, strictly because they didn't have efficient and effective learning strategies. It wasn't that they weren't capable, but nobody had shared with them the strategies that the successful students were using. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And I think it's a great compliment to a wonderful conference like this, because over the years, I'd been to a lot of teaching conferences. They were great conferences, but they all focused on how we as faculty could improve our teaching. We could do more active learning, we could engage students, we could use different pedagogy. But it always seemed to me that we were leaving out 50% of the equation, because we could be the best faculty on the planet. But if students come to the table not understanding what their role in the process is, we're not going to see the kind of learning gains we could if they came to the table understanding that and we could partner in that process. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. And I'm going to ask you to do 2 things that I wish I had done at the beginning of my career, but didn't know that it was important to do it. Everybody in this room has had students who were not doing well. They came and talked to you, and they started doing a lot better. But if you're like me, you never ask those students to send me an email and tell me exactly what you did differently. So I'm going to ask you to do that, because those emails are really, really important to share with other students. And also keep the before and after scores. Because if a student comes in and says, oh, well, it's me, I just made a 60 on the first test, what am I supposed to do? Then you say, don't worry about that. Here's a student who made 42 on the first test, hundreds on everything else, using the strategies that we're going to talk about in this session. And it makes a huge difference. And so whenever you work with students and they do well, just have them send you an email to do that. And then the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that you will get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. And you're going to get it in PowerPoint form. It won't be in PDF form, because I want you to be able to pick and choose any slides that you want to use with your students. Feel free to change them, because what I found over the years is that this information is pretty transformational for student learning. And I do want to say that the intervention that we talked about earlier, and Vice Provost Hilton said, well, maybe it's you get more motivated students who come and participate in these kinds of interventions. But I think the research now is robust enough to show that regardless of preparation, motivation, students who are introduced to these pedagogical innovations, while at the same time being taught metacognition, it really does make a difference. So it's probably a combination, but the strategies really make a big difference. And so that's what we're going to talk about, how it not only increases the excellence so that all students do better, but it increases equity in the sense that the achievement gap is reduced. And now, Vice Provost Hilton said he came happy because spring was starting. Well, he didn't know that I'm actually responsible for that, because when I go places, I always put in a request to have temperature that is slightly similar to Baton Rouge temperature. And so we had 70 degrees. This was a screenshot from my cell phone. It was 70 yesterday, and you see the high today is supposed to be 74. Now, the unfortunate thing is I always request that the weather stay that way when I leave, but that request is almost never granted. And so I noticed that it's going to get down to 45 tonight. The high tomorrow is going to be 58, then 51, et cetera, et cetera. But it's going to warm up eventually. But I'm responsible for that temperature, and I was happy to bring it to you. What did you say? Oh, he said they'll pay to extend my visit. Yeah. And so I'm going to just do a couple of questions to make sure that the iClickers work. And I'm sure they do, but this is more practice for me than anything else. But I know that we have people here from a variety of different areas. So if you could just take out your iClicker and indicate which area you are, and I'll start this. And I'm typically going to give us about 15 seconds or so. I think that that'll be enough time. Well, maybe more than that. How many people do we have in the room approximately? How many? 104? Okay. Plus or minus, 5 or so. Okay, and so let's see what we have. Okay, and it looks like maybe I have to move this up. Oh, okay. So, okay, yeah, because I do know that LSA is the largest college. Quite a few STEM folks, architecture, art and design, education and business, and almost 20% other. So somebody who's from other, just yell out what you're from. Social work. Social work. Okay, I do this for anybody from social work, yeah. What else? Public health, okay. Libraries, okay. Medical school, okay. Well, thank you so much for participating. And I see that this is working a little bit differently than in the practice session. I'll just have to move the graph around, which is fine. And then the next, I gotta tap this first and then it moves. Okay, yeah, I wanted to get some sense of how familiar you are with metacognition and our equity and excellence. So please just indicate if you're familiar with one but not the other, with both, neither, and if you're not interested in either one. You just came for the food this morning. Oh, that's right, I have to start it. Okay, yeah, I use Turning Technologies a lot, and we don't have to start that, but. Oh, we're growing in attendance. Okay, so let's see what we came up with. Oh, which one did I look at first? Which letter did I go to first? E, absolutely. And so I'm happy that only 1% of us is not interested at all. But I see that about almost half of us are, 41%, less than half, are somewhat familiar with both. And not very many are totally not familiar. And so what I'm going to hope to do this morning is, if you are familiar, I want you to to see what kind of perspective you can get that maybe is a little bit different than what you had before as we go through this. And so the other thing that I do whenever I speak at institutions, I always look at the retention and graduation rates because that tells me something about the institution. And I looked at Michigan, and your retention rate is very good. It's 97%, the first and second year retention rate. The national average is 72, and the Michigan average is 73. And when I looked at the graduation rates, the 6-year graduation rate is 91%, which is still very good because the national average is 47.6%. And the expected, this particular website looks not only at your retention and graduation rates, but it looks at what your expected rate should be based on the preparation of your students who come. And so your expected rate is only 87.4, and you've exceeded that, you're at 91. So when I saw those figures, I started to stand up here and say, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing, drop the mic and walk away. But I didn't think the committee would be too happy with me if I did that. And so although those rates are very good, I think that there is a way that we could improve those rates. If we teach students how to learn, and that is what I found is the key, that so many students come to college not really knowing what learning is about, that there's a process of learning that's any different from memorization and regurgitation, and then helping students develop the right mindset about intelligence, Carol Dweck's work from Stanford, and then narrowing or closing that achievement gap, because I saw a couple of posters and I had gotten some statistics from the university that shows that there still is a gap between the success rates of majority students and underrepresented students, and if you can close that gap, then that's going to get the numbers up, and then motivate students to implement these effective metacognitive learning strategies. And I think if we can do that, then we'll be able to get the retention rate up even higher as well as the graduation rate. Now, there's certainly an invaluable resource, the Science Learning Center. Is anybody here from that center? Okay, stand up, please. Let's give her a hand. Thank you. So she knows all this stuff that we're going to talk about today and more. But then as I was walking around, I saw a poster, and there was another center that focused on helping students make the transformation. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody from that center, please stand up. Or that poster, it was over there. Yeah, what's the name of it? Yeah, the Foundational Course Initiative. Anybody here from the Foundational Course Initiative? Okay. Yes. Well, those are great initiatives, and I think that they've seen the kind of results that I'm talking about. Now, I said equity and excellence. So what do equity and excellence look like? Well, equity is just involves reducing the discrepancy in the outcomes between low-income students versus high-income students and minority versus majority students. And excellence is just fostering among all students a high level of knowledge and skills necessary for success in the 21st century, because those things are changing now. And I said metacognition is a way to do that. Well, what is metacognition? It's just a term that was coined by cognitive psychologist Flavel back in 1976, and simply put, it's just your ability to think about your own thinking. The way I explain it to students is I say, it's like you have a big brain outside your brain looking at what your brain is doing. And that big brain is asking your brain questions. And it's saying, does she really understand this information, or did she just memorize it last night because the test is today? If you've got a paper to write, the metacognitive brain says, well, does she realize that she needs to start thinking about the topic very early? She needs to go to the writing center. She needs to discuss her ideas. She needs to get a draft written early enough to talk with the professor so that she can make any revisions that will impact the grade that she makes on this paper, or is she just planning to whip it out the night before the way she did in high school? And it's your ability to be very cognizant that you are a problem solver. You don't have to have someone else answer all of your problems for you and any questions that come up. Now, it's not that you won't have to talk to people, but you can take steps to answer the questions you can answer. Because let's face it, most of the questions that our students ask us about our courses, where could they find that information? On the syllabus, exactly. And so if you're not using your metacognitive brain, you might think, well, I wonder when the next test is going to be. What is it going to cover? And the metacognitive brain says, we can answer that question. Because you think, I better go talk to the professor. The metacognitive brain says, we can answer that question. And then your brain says, well, what am I supposed to do? The metacognitive brain says, well, what did our instructor give us that we might use to get that information? And so it leads you to the resources that you need to go to. It's your ability to monitor, plan, and control your mental processing so you know if you're understanding something, if you've just memorized it. It's your ability to accurately judge your level of learning. And that's really, really important because most times students who say that they've studied hours and hours, in fact, how many of you have had students who said, yeah, I studied for hours and hours for that test and I still failed it? If you had students tell you that, just raise your hand, please. Okay, yeah, students think that all the time. Now, those students aren't lying. I have to warn you, I ask a lot of questions, and there are no right or wrong answers to the questions I ask. I just want to know what your experience has been or what you're thinking. And so when those students say that, they are not lying, but what kinds of activities have those students been engaged in when they were spending those hours and hours studying? What were they doing? Okay, exactly, memorizing information. Sometimes people say on Facebook or texting, and some of them are doing that, but I'm not even talking about those. I'm talking about the students who really thought they were engaged in learning activities. Yeah, they were memorizing, regurgitating, they were rereading information, and so they would have done great if it were a psychology test and we asked them, define positive reinforcement, define negative reinforcement, define punishment. They do great because they've memorized that information. But those aren't the kinds of questions we ask. We give them scenarios, and we say, tell us whether positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, or punishment will work better in this case, and defend your answer. And so they've been studying at the wrong level. And that's really, really important that they understand that. Now, and that has to do with something called Bloom's taxonomy. So how many people would say that you are not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Please raise your hand if you're not familiar. Okay, a few, yes, and we're going to talk about that. When I first started doing these talks, there were a lot of people who weren't familiar, but now that our accrediting bodies are expecting us to write these student learning outcomes that they want us to tie to Bloom's, and a lot more people are. So most people in the room were familiar with Bloom's. But let me ask this, how many of us have actively taught Bloom's taxonomy to our students? Raise your hand if you've done that. Great, thank you. A lot fewer. I'm going to urge all of us to actively teach Bloom's taxonomy to our students. Now, I understand those people who were not doing it because I wasn't for the first 30 years, because I learned Bloom's taxonomy. My PhD is actually in chemical education, but I learned Bloom's as a construct that we as faculty could use to target our teaching, to target our assessment, but I never taught it to students. But when I got to LSU, at the center there, they were teaching Bloom's to students with great success. And so I started teaching students Bloom's, and the number one reaction I would get after sharing Bloom's with a student was they'd say, wow, why didn't anybody tell me about this before? Or they say, wow, I wish I had known about this in high school. Because Bloom's taxonomy is really a lens through which students have to view statements. In fact, when I speak at many universities, I talk to student groups and I'll ask them, how many of you have ever heard a professor say something like, this is the university now, you gotta kick it up a notch. This is not high school. You've gotta, we operate at higher levels here. All the hands go up. And then when I ask, how many of you could tell me, or who thinks you could tell me exactly what those faculty mean by that statement? Almost no hands go up, but the ones that do, they say things like, oh, that means that college is going to be harder than high school. They'll say, that means that we got to do a lot more work. Sometimes they'll say, that means that we got to do a lot more on our own. And then I'll ask, how many of you have ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy? And nobody has. But I think that Bloom's taxonomy is the lens through which students have to view that statement, that you've got to kick it up a notch and operate it at a higher level. Because if they don't even know that levels exist or where they've been operating, then they don't know what to do to kick themselves up a notch. So we're going to talk about how to share that with students and look at some of the impact that that's had. And know what you know and what you don't know. How many of you have had students come in and they just look like, you know, I'm prepared for this test, I know I'm ready. In fact, you may have heard them say that I studied, I was prepared, but then even when they turned the test in, many of them, they said, oh, I think I did so well on that test. And so you're anxious to grade it, and you see they missed this one, they missed that one, they missed the other one. How did they possibly think that they had done so well on the test? And so then when we give that test back to them, where they thought they'd made an A or B, and it comes back with a C, D, or lower, what happens to their self-esteem at that point? Exactly. I'm seeing the visuals. Sometimes I get the sound effects. Yeah, it plummets. And then the normal psychological self-defense mechanism kicks in. If our class is telling them they are not the smart, intelligent person they perceive themselves to be, they're going to start psychologically withdrawing. They might start sitting further back in the class. They might start missing classes. They're less engaged. And then when that happens, what happens to their performance on the next test? It's even lower, yeah. And so they're in this downward spiral that they can't get themselves out of, but metacognition can actually get them out of that. And I tell my students all the time, I don't care if you made a 30 on the first test. I know you can make 90 or higher on the next test because your 30 had nothing to do with how smart you are. It had everything to do with the strategies that you used to prepare for that test. And I can teach you to do something different, so that's not a problem. And when they do that, and then I show them the before and after examples, which are really, really important, then they believe that if they use these strategies, they will improve, and it makes a big difference. And so I just wanted to just share an email with you. This was a graduate student who was on the verge of getting kicked out of LSU because she was on probation, and she sent this to me after the final. She had to make a 4.0 that semester, or she was going to get kicked out of the PhD program. And on her last final, she scored 112 out of 100, happy and overjoyed. She wanted to share the good news. And in her PS, I think it really shows what a lot of students go through when they're in academic difficulty. She says, I believe my GPA has gone from a sad probation 2.77 to a happy free 3.38. So I'm free from the academic shackles. And this is what students feel when they are not doing well. And the students who come to Michigan, I mean, they've done very well in high school. They are great students, and they think that they should be able to continue to do that. And when they have difficulty, then many of them, it really puts them into kind of a psychological despair mode. These were another couple of students, key concept about metacognition, and this is Marcia again. And that's the other thing about this information. Students are grateful when we take the time to share this information with them, and they can see their improvement. Marcia now, this is the one who's about to get kicked out of the PhD program. She's a research chemist at the at the Department of Agriculture, and has won research awards, has won international awards, and she was this close from being kicked out of the PhD program altogether. Now, when I started looking at this and learning about these possibilities, I started wondering, why is it that most students don't have these skills, especially students who come to places like the University of Michigan? Well, it just wasn't necessary at all in high school. And in some cases, if we're talking about graduate school, I work with med school students, law school students, dental school students. They haven't learned this stuff either. And so many times it wasn't necessary in their undergraduate career. Now, you may not be able to see the numbers, and so I'll tell you what this is. This is the UCLA Higher Education Research Institute. They do a survey every year where they survey first-year students, and they've been doing it for a number of years. And they ask a lot of questions, but I'm particularly interested in two. One is how many hours a week students spent doing any homework at all in 12th grade, and what was their average when they graduated from high school. And as you'll notice, the the percent who spent at least 6 hours, that was about 37% in 2010, got up to a high of about 45% in 2015, and then 44.1%. So fewer than 50% of the students are spending even 6 hours in a whole week doing any homework in 12th grade. But you notice that the students who graduated with an A average, that number passed 50% in 2013. Got up to a high of almost 59% in 2015, and then it was 55.1, 51. So now it's kind of going in the right direction. I don't know what the 2018 figures are not out yet. But when I saw those numbers, then I understood why students were not knowing that they needed to spend any time on their courses in college, because they didn't spend time doing any homework in high school, worked out fine there. And I often say that our students are really just being good scientists. They are using all of the data points that they have accumulated up to this point in time, and they're basing their actions on that. And so they're not spending any time doing any homework and expecting to get the same result that they got in high school. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions because one important part of this, I'll call it an intervention, is not telling students what they need to do, but do it by asking reflection questions so that they're really thinking about their own experience and they see the changes they need to make. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. The first one, I was talking with a group of students, well, the first group was at LSU. In the interim, I asked students this all over the country and other countries, but I asked them, what did most of your teachers in high school do the day before, the class period before the test, day before the test? What do you think they told me? Review. I expected that, no surprises there. And then, though, I asked them, what did the teachers do during the review session? I was shocked by the answer I got. And I'm seeing some smiles out there. I think someone knows what I'm getting at. Okay, so what do you think they said the teachers did during the review? Okay, somebody said lectured. Okay, what else? There you go. Say it louder. Exactly. She was exactly who I was looking at. They gave them the test questions and the answers to the test. How many of you knew that was happening in high school? Raise your hand if you did. Okay, these folks knew. I had no idea. I thought they were going to say, well, they told us the topics that were going to be on the test, the things that we needed to review, and I was all set to say, yes, but we don't do that in college. You have to do that for yourself. But that's not what they said. They said they gave us the questions and the answers. And in defense of teachers, because I was wondering, why would teachers do this? But we have put such an untenable system in place where teachers are graded or evaluated on the results of their students on these standardized tests. And whether or not they're going to have a job next year, their school's going to be taken over, depends on these student results. They think, because the teachers told me this, she said, I don't do it, but the ones who do think that if they give the students the answers, they're going to do well on the standardized tests, and that's going to be better for the school. But we know that that's not true, but what that did help me understand is why so many students didn't do anything at all before the first test. Because they figure, okay, we're going to get the answers to the test questions. I'm going to be good. Because the third question I asked, when I found out that's what happened, I said, okay, well, if you never went to class a single day except just the day before the test, the class period before the test, and you went to class that day and you paid really close attention to what was going on, what's the lowest grade you would get on the test the next day? And what do you think they told me? Okay, I heard somebody say A. Very few of them said A. Very few of them said C. B. Yeah, most of them said B. And even though it's true that when our students start our classes, they think, they're on their way to an A, but they're not going to be unhappy with a B. And so when they figured, well, I'll just wait for this and I can get my B the way I did before, it really helped me understand why we were going to have to let them know that this is different and then give them strategies for adapting to the new situation. So I always encourage us as faculty to give our first test or quiz very early in the semester. Within the first 2 weeks. I used to give my first test or quiz about 3 or 4 weeks in when I figured I had covered enough stuff to put on a test, but then I realized that students need a data point. They need a wake-up call before they're 3 or 4 weeks into the semester because they need to know that what they're doing is not working. And so if we can do that within the first week or so, and it could be a quiz, you don't have to count it, but just something that lets them know that what they're doing is not going to lead to success, then it makes a big difference. So basically what we're saying is that we as faculty have to help students make that transition to college. We've got to help them understand the difference, the gap between their current behavior and the current level of learning and current grades, and productive behavior and the desired grades. And so I'm going to start now. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to ask you to take about 10 seconds to get your own answer, and then just talk with your next door neighbor or in groups of 2 or 3 to see what they think. And then we'll come back in a couple of minutes to see what we think about these questions as a group. The first question is, what's the difference, if you think there's any difference at all, between studying and learning? And then for the second question, I'm going to give you two scenarios, and I'm going to ask you if you would work harder for one of these scenarios than the other. First scenario, I come to you, and I'm the instructor, and I come to you and I say, look, the next test in this class is next week. And you flunked the first test. You didn't do well at all. So you have to make an A on this next test if you're going to do well in this class. So you know how hard you would work for that. Second scenario, and I want to know if you'd work harder for one than the other. Second scenario, I come to you and I say, you know, the second test in this class is going to be next week. And I now see that I'm going to have to give the class what everybody kept asking me if I was going to do before the first test. And I said, no, this is college. We don't do that. Everybody kept asking me, are you going to give us a review session? Can we have a review session? And I said, absolutely not. So I didn't do a review session, but the class flunked. The average was 62%. So with this next test that's coming up, I see that I'm going to have to offer a review session. So I'm going to offer a review session before this next test, and you are going to teach that review session. I'm going to have you come up to the front of the class, and you are going to explain all of the important concepts, paying particular attention to the more difficult concepts to make sure everybody is prepared for the test the next day. Would you work harder for one of those than the other? And if so, which one and why? So take about, again, 10 seconds to get your own answer, and then just turn to your next door neighbor or turn around and talk to people behind you, see what they think, and in a couple of minutes we'll come back and see what we think of those as a group. So start thinking and talking, please. Okay. Okay, let's see what we came up with. Now, I love doing these reflection questions because when I do this with students, just as you had a lot of vigorous discussion out there, students do the same thing. Nobody's ever posed these questions to them, but when we do, they think about it, they discuss it, and they have great answers. I mean, well, let me just say, another important part of this process is there is no right or wrong answer. And I tell students this because if we want them to actively participate, then they have to know that we're going to honor every response. So let's start with the first one. And I said, if any. So is there anybody here who would say that studying and learning are exactly the same thing? Okay, and that's usually the case. So would somebody share with the group how you characterized the difference between studying and learning? Okay, and actually when I ask these, I do this with faculty groups and student groups. I like to have at least 3 responses to every question. And I want to identify the 3 speakers before the first one starts speaking. So I have my number 1, and you have to remember your numbers because I won't remember your numbers. Okay, here's my number 1, thank you. I need 2 other people. I know y'all were talking out there. So, okay, here's my number 2 and here's my number 3. Thank you. Okay, so number 1, what did you say? Oh, actually, and we probably won't, yeah, you're probably going to have to use your outside voice because in the interest of time, we probably won't be able to. Oh, no, you need it for the recording, though?
Yeah, they need it for the recording.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll just pass it quickly. So I just said that when I was in both high school and college, what I would do is quickly with each class learn the criteria by which I was going to be judged, and then I would study directed toward satisfying that criteria rather than actually choosing to learn material.
Okay, great. And then what would learning have been?
Well, that would have been a lot harder. And actually, what I gradually started to do in college, at least, was choose classes that were graded based on paper writing, because I came to feel that writing papers forced me to engage with the material in such a way that I actually learned material.
Okay, great. Yeah, and students don't actually say it. Oh, where's my number 2? Raise your hand, she can start running. Oh, there she is, great. Students don't actually say it that way, but they say something that is very similar, that the goal is very different. If you're studying, it's just to make a grade, but if you are learning, they use some other terms. But let me get the other 2 and see what they say. Yes, number 2.
Actually, that is what I was going to say. For me, studying was more memorizing and just rereading the content that I needed to pass a test or a class, whereas learning to me was applying those things that I read and or studied.
Yes, now that there are three main answers that students give, but that's the number one. They'll say, studying is just memorizing information for a test or a quiz, but learning is when I understand that information, I can apply it, I can relate it to things that I already know. Absolutely. And yes.
Yeah, we echoed those observations that studying isn't always necessarily learning. Like, for instance, we had the example that my daughter fell into that fallacy in college that you mentioned, that grade on a test is proportional to time spent studying. And she was a biology major, so that didn't always work out so well. And I remembered my experience as a physics major that, learning was more like fighting my way through the problem solving. That's where the learning occurred versus necessarily what a lot of people consider studying.
Yes, and getting back to his daughter who thought that the amount of time put in was commensurate with learning, a lot of students think that, and that's why I used to tell students, put in 2 hours in out of class for every hour outside. Sometimes people say 3, but now I don't do that anymore because I don't want them to equate just time spent with learning. We talk about, you'll see as we go through this, what are the strategies, what are the tasks that they need to be involved in with learning. Thank you to our 3 volunteers. The other common things that students say is they'll say, studying is short term, but learning is long term. Sometimes they'll say studying is tedious, learning is fun, but they realize that there's a difference. And so they say, okay, so for purposes of this discussion, if we take the difference that studying is just memorizing information for a test or a quiz, learning is when you understand that information, you can apply it, etc. Up to this point in time, have you been more in learn mode or in study mode? And what do you think they tell me? Study mode, exactly. They don't even know there's a learn mode to be in most times. And I'm doing this as an iClicker question. So, okay, let's. Okay, for which task would you work harder? A, make an A on the test, or B, teach the material? Oh, great, I haven't lost, we're still growing, okay. I was thinking people might have been leaving at this point, okay. My goal is to get up to 120 before the session ends. Okay, and so let's see. Teach the material. This is what most of the students say. So someone who said you would work harder if you had to teach the material, tell us why that is. They have a volunteer? Okay, yes, all the way in the back. Yes, I'm recognizing the person. Oh, she's waiting for the mic. Okay.
So it looks like you need to do A to do B because you want to be confident when you teach.
Okay, yes, because the students who say A most of the time will say, well, it's my grade. I'm trying to get into med school. But then somebody who says B says, well, yeah, but if you know it well enough to teach it, then the A is going to come automatically. Now, and again, there are no right or wrong answers. And in fact, who said, if the person who said A there are 8 people who said A. If one of those people is willing to share with the group why you said A, could you share that with the group? Yeah, because B is not the right answer. B is what most people would do, and including me, but sometimes the students who said A said, well, I'm really good talking in front of groups, and so it's not going to be a problem for me to get up and teach the class, but if I know I have to make an A on the test, I'm going to study everything. And I'm going to make sure I know everything backwards and forwards. And so that's why they would work harder for A, and that's perfectly fine. Usually the people who say A are studying the correct way, but most people say B, and one of them, they say, well, I got to really know it if I have to teach it. Anybody think of a different reason that you would work harder for B? Okay, yeah, just yell it out. And I'll repeat it. Yeah, because we're not going to have time to run the mic, so I'll repeat the answers. Yes. Absolutely. She said, other people are counting on me. Sometimes they'll say, well, now everybody's grade is going to depend on what I do. And so I want to make sure I can explain it more than one way. I can use diagrams. I can use examples, because one young lady said, because if they don't pass the test, I'm not going to have any friends after that. Yeah. And then there's one other common answer I get. Anybody think of another reason you would work harder if you had to teach? Okay, yes, all the way in the back. That's number 3, yeah. They say, well, I don't want to look stupid in front of the class. Absolutely. So they all agreed that they would work harder if they had to teach the material. And so then I asked them, up to this point in time, have you been in scenario A mode or scenario B mode? And what do you think most people say? A, exactly. So that's 2 parts of the problem. They're not doing well, not because they're not totally capable, but because they have been studying to make an A on the test as opposed to preparing to teach the material, or I should say, and they have been working, well, they've been in study mode and not learn mode, and they've been working to make an A. So I talked to a group of students at LSU, honors chemistry students, and this one young man heard this, and he said, oh, this sounds really interesting. I'm going to try this. And he said he had a betta fish at home. And so I met him when I was talking to this class September 17th, and he emailed me October 25th, and he said, yeah, I've been using that strategy. And when I talked with him, with the class, rather, the first exam score was... Yeah, this is the cursor, for some reason, disappears occasionally. But he'd made a 66 on his first bio exam, 62 on his first chem exam. The second exam after the talk, 98 bio, 83 chem, and he ended up with a B in both courses, whereas he had low Ds before that. And so he sent me an email because I asked students, now I'm trying to get it to, oh, okay. I don't know if it wants me to start this. Okay, I'm just trying to advance the slide, and as I usually do, I've lost the clicker, but here it is. I don't know why this thing would be stuck. So, back into the window of the slideshow. Okay, and let's see if that, well, we don't want a blackout right now, I don't think. Great, thank you very much. Okay, and this is the email that he sent. He said that after he heard the session, he started attending more of the, and I think you have supplemental instruction here at University of Michigan, do you? It's a peer-led review session type program, and it's an international program demonstrated to usually students who participate in these review sessions in the course with a half letter grade to a grade higher, but he started attending more of those sessions. But what he did different was before he went to the sessions, he would try to answer as many of the questions as possible to see what he understood and what he didn't. And then at those sessions, he would know what he needed to really concentrate on. Then after the sessions, he'd go to his room and teach the materials to his betta fish. And anything he couldn't explain, he'd study more, and he'd continue that cycle until he could explain everything in his notes. And I've had students who will send me pictures of their pets that they're teaching things to, their kids. But when they get in the habit of recognizing that I need to be able to teach this to someone else, and I tell them, the good news is you don't have to have your own class to be, was that a pet? No. Okay. You don't have to have your own class to be in teach the material mode. If you have empty chairs in your room, if you have stuffed animals, if you have imaginary friends, any audience, either real or imagined, works great because of this. How many of us have ever been in a situation when we thought we totally understood something, but then we started explaining it to somebody, and you got to the point where it's, oh, I'm not sure. And I ask students that, and they say, yeah. And I tell them, yeah, it happens to everybody. And I'll say, but if it was class material that you were explaining, if you hadn't been in the process of explaining this to someone, when would you have found out that you didn't totally understand this material? And when would it have been? On the test. Students are telling me this. I'm not saying if you don't do this, you're going to fail the test. They're telling me on the test. And so they're internalizing this information, and they're much more likely to do it. And let's see. I hope I don't have to click in this every single time now to advance. Okay, and so I'm going to tell you about 2 additional students, and again, strategies, because my goal is to give you strategies that you can start using with your students immediately. One involved reading. Travis was a junior in psychology, and I talked with him about 30 minutes after the second test. He'd made a 47 and 52, so he was on the verge of failing this course big time. Talked with him for about 30 minutes, and you see his grades after that. He ended up with an 82. And then Dana was a first-year physics student whom I met after the second test, where she made a 54, and I met her at a Change Your Major workshop. because she was very interested in physics when she came to LSU. It's a straight A student from high school. In fact, she was on a very prestigious American Physical Society scholarship. She always knew she wanted to be a medical physicist because she is from Houston, and she talked with a lot of the medical physicists at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And so when she made the 80, she was alarmed. But then when she made the 54, she decided, I got to get out of physics. I can't do this. And so I went to the workshop. I wasn't teaching it. I just wanted to see, what did they tell people at a change your major workshop? And so the counselor who was running the workshop asked students to tell what their current major was and what they were changing to. And Dana said, well, I came here to major in physics, but that's just not working out. And I'll never forget this, the counselor's response was, oh yes, I understand that, because physics is hard. And she said it just like that. But as Dana was leaving, I said, Dana, do you have about an hour you can spend talking with me in the office? And she said, sure. And I said, look, I'm not going to try to talk you into staying in physics, because if you really want to do something else, it's fine with me if you change. But I want you to know that you're leaving physics not because you can't do it, but because you're interested in something else. And so she came to the office. We spent an hour. Those were her grades after that. She had a 4.0 that semester, and she graduated with a 3.8 cum in physics. And so I'm going to just briefly tell you what the strategies were. With Travis, it was reading. Many of our students don't have effective reading strategies where they really comprehend and retain what they read. And there was a very, very simple strategy that I learned actually by going to a workshop, because there were so many students at LSU who were coming to our center asking if we could help them with reading. And I was a chemistry professor. I didn't know how to teach people how to read, but I'm going to show you on the next slide this process. But basically, the solution is to help students recognize that they've got to prepare their minds for reading before they start to read. And that involves previewing. Look at the boldface print, the italicized words, any charts or graphs. Or if it's a novel or something without those markers, just read every first and last sentence in a paragraph, etc. And then develop questions that they want the reading to answer for them. So if I were reading a chapter on acids and bases, I would see strong acid, strong base, weak base, and maybe boldface print. And so I might say, well, I wonder what this thing's going to say is the difference between strong acids and weak acids. Is it going to say that one of them is more harmful than the other? I don't know. So you've given yourself a purpose for doing the reading. And then when you start to read, just read the first paragraph. Read that paragraph, stop, put it in your own words, and then read the second paragraph, stop, put that in your own words, and try to fold in what was in the first paragraph, and then read the third and subsequent paragraphs the same way. Now, does it sound like, though, to you, if I have to do all that, it's going to take a long time to finish? Yeah, and students always say, yeah, but I tell students that that's what it sounds like. But students love this. They'll email me and say, Dr. McGuire, that reading strategy was fantastic. I'm getting so much more out of my reading now. And I'll ask them, I said, that's great. Are you finding that it's taking you longer to get through the reading now doing that than what you were doing before? And to a person, they say, well, no. Actually, I finished the reading sooner doing this than what I was doing before. Now, I didn't set it up totally for you the way I set it up for students. So I don't know if you'll get this, but I asked them, and I told them this is what happens. I said, why do you think that it should take less time to do the reading going through this process than what you were doing before? Anybody have any idea? Yes?
Well, I actually just graduated, and I find that when I read, like, without a specific strategy,
Uh-huh.
I do a lot of reading over it, and it happens to me.
Exactly. Yes, brilliant. And see, I didn't go through that part. But yeah, because before you have strategies, you will read a little bit, but you're not focusing, so then you have to go back and reread. Read, go back, read, go back, read, go back, read, go back. But with this new way, you are moving more slowly through the material, but you get to the end point sooner because you're not doing all that back and forth. Absolutely. And then sometimes they'll say, and I'm more focused. And the good news is that you actually speed up using this process, because can you imagine when you've gotten to the sixth paragraph, if you've understood everything in the first five, are you going to be able to read the sixth paragraph faster? Yes, with understanding. And so it really, really makes a big difference. And so this is what I taught Travis. And this is just kind of a summary of that. It's called SQ5Rs. Do that survey, come up with questions, read one paragraph at a time while you're reciting in your own words. And you can teach them to annotate in the margins. And then when you get to the end of a section, try to review what was in that section. And then the last R is reflect. reflect on the reading and see if they are, for example, if it's a history course and they talk about the causes for certain events, are there other things that might have caused this event? If it's a public health course where you're talking about interacting with people who you want to make healthier, and you say, well, you really need to have a diet that is focused on fresh fruits and vegetables. Well, yeah, but what if you are talking to clients who live in a food desert? And so the possibility of getting fresh fruits and vegetables is going to be a lot more difficult. So just reflecting on the reading and teaching that strategy has made a big difference with a lot of students. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to put a passage on the screen. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to read it. And then when I take it off the screen, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about it. And so let me see if I can try to move this. Well, actually, it's okay if that's in the way. Oh, it's not in the way. Okay, yeah, so read that. Okay, I'm going to take it off the screen. You may not have finished, but I always wish I had a camera at this point and I could project your expressions on the screen. Some of you are squinting forward. I actually saw somebody go. Okay, so is there anybody who thinks that you could summarize what was in that passage just based on what you're... Okay, have you seen it before? No? Okay, so how would you summarize that? And
microphone. And in addition to a microphone, he was paid for it, and then he ran into or worked with some sisters who traveled across mountains. Sometimes they had nice, easy, gentle passages, but usually it was through valleys or mountains.
he is good. Let's give him a hand. Okay. Now, that's not exactly it, but it's close enough. I'd give you an 80 on that. Okay, now I'm going to ask everybody else, if you had known before you started to read that this passage was about the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, I want you to read it again and shake your head up and down, yes, or back and forth, no, if it makes more sense to you now. Okay? Yeah, because now we have a context. We now know what that sentence, he said an egg, not a table, correctly typifies this unexplored planet. We know what that means. And he was saying that he was working with sisters, but now we know who the three sisters were. Who were the three sisters? The ships, exactly, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And so that's proof positive that if you know what you're reading about before you start to read, then your brain can process the information differently. And I like to do these kinds of things with students to give them actual proof, because if I say, you need to preview the information, then I want them to see that that actually has an impact. And so you could just take a passage from one of your classes that they haven't studied before to demonstrate that that makes a difference. And that's the reference for that information. Now, Dana, I mentioned her, and the problem that Dana was having is the problem that I find most students in STEM courses have. And actually students in LSA courses also, how many of you have had students who do really well on the homework, but then they flunk the exams? Have you seen that? Yeah, well, the reason that happens is because of the way students do their homework. And so I want to ask us to think back to the last time we were doing homework, and if you ever have done this, raise your hand. How many of us have ever read a problem that we had to work or a question that we had to answer and then flip back in the chapter to find an example of the problem we had to work or a discussion of the question we had to answer? If you've ever done that, raise your hand. Okay, yes, we are so like our students. All of the students are doing this all over the country, other countries too. I did the same thing, I tell them. And I said, yes, but, and I'll ask you, when we did that, were we working the problem? No. Students say no. What was working the problem? The book. They'll say the book, the example, the author, exactly. And I said, yes, that's what was working the problem. But if you're like me, and I said, I know you are really good students, you're bright students, that's why you're here. How many of you remember thinking when you saw how the example was worked or how the question was answered, think, oh yeah, I got that. Oh yeah, I understand that. And students say, yeah. Then I ask, but what happened when we got to the test or quiz? If they changed anything at all around, what happened? Exactly. Yes, he did this. Yeah, sometimes they'll say, I don't got that. Yeah. And so there's a way that we can teach students to avoid that. Solving the homework with no external aids and also test master their concepts. And this is Dana now. She's now a practicing medical physicist when she completed her residency about 3 years ago. And so this homework strategy that we can teach students is before they look at the first homework problem or first question, they got to study the information. Study the material as if it's going to be on a test or a quiz the very next day, or as if they've got to teach it. And whether they're using their textbook or the notes, they're going to come across examples. And I ask students, what do you do if you're studying from your textbook or your notes? When you get to an example, what do you do? And what do you think students tell me? Yes. Where's my skip it people? Raise your hand. Yes. Okay. They said skip it. How many of you knew that students were skipping all the examples? Okay. I did not know that because I didn't skip the examples. I would read the problem statement. I would look at what the author did. And some students do that, but most of them said they skip it. And so I tell them, you got to commit to yourself that you will never skip another example, because the examples are our brain's best resource for convincing itself that it can work these problems, it can answer these questions if it studied the information. It doesn't need the textbook author to do that. And so then when you get to an example, then just work it. Even if you're not sure exactly what to do next, you get to a point where you think you're stuck, just power your way through until you get to an answer. And then when you get to an answer, compare just your answer with the answer in the book. If you got the same answer, then you can look at what the textbook author did. But if you didn't get the same answer, don't look yet. Try to figure out where your mistake was. Now, I'll ask students at this point, I say, at this point in the process, do you think making a mistake is good or bad? And I'm going to ask you, what do you think students tell me? Is a mistake at this point good or bad? Oh, okay, you said bad. I was so hoping, because this group is different, that you'd be different from your faculty counterparts all over the world. Faculty always say bad. Students always say good. And in fact, when I spoke last week at an institution, we had students and faculty in the same group, and I had them write it down. The faculty said the students would say bad, the students said good. And I say, absolutely. But I said, but now don't tell students, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's bad if you don't make a mistake in this process. It's fantastic if you don't make a mistake at this point. But why is it good if you make a mistake at this point? And they are so dead on. What do you think they tell me? Why is it good if you make a mistake? Why? What'd you say? You can go back and review it. Yes, they said now you know where your brain is having a tendency to go wrong, so you can go back and study that. Anybody think of another reason? Exactly. The number one reason I get is they say, you learn from your mistakes. You're not going to make the same mistake twice. And there's one other reason that they say. Anybody think of another reason? Oh, so they know how to problem solve, okay, yes, and sometimes I say that. And what's the other, what are you thinking? Interesting. Now, they've never said that, but you're right. You don't know where the ceiling is. No, the answer that they say is, it's not the test. So you're not losing points. You can fix it before the test. And now, how many of you have ever had a student say, I would have done so much better on this test, but I just made simple mistakes. I made so many. Have you heard that? Yeah, and I tell students, my philosophy is there's no such thing as simple mistakes. Mistakes are things that have to be made. And either you're going to make them during this process, or where are you going to make them? On the test. And so then students buy into the notion that I've got to go through this process to get the mistakes out of my system. So let us catch up. Check to see if it's correct. If it's not, figure out where your mistake was made. And that's just the homework problems. Now, when you get, just the examples, when you get to the actual homework problems, work them as if you are on a test or a quiz. That's what I loved about the award-winning project that gave students the option of going through these as an exam, because when students work the actual homework, I tell them do 2 or 3 at a time. Try to speed it up, put yourself in testing conditions, because so many students who run out of time on a test or a quiz run out of time not because they don't know the information, but they're plotting through it very meticulously the way they did when they were doing their homework, because there's no time constraints there. And it's not that they couldn't do it faster, but they've just never practiced doing it faster. And so if they practice doing it faster, then it makes a big difference. And I'll give you one more example of a student who was not doing well and started doing well. He's a University of Michigan student. I met him when I came, this was maybe 5 years ago, and I talked to a student group in the M-STEM program. And this is Tabena Annans. Anybody here know Tabena Annans? No? Okay. He's a 2015 University of Michigan biomedical engineering graduate, and he was a NACME scholar, National, no, what is NACME? It's an engineering program for minorities typically. And this is from Tabena's, I got it from his LinkedIn page. He's now a Healthy Start assistant at the Institute for Population Health, data science and population health analytics enthusiast. And so he's doing very, very well. So, and he emailed me after I spoke with the group, and he said the strategies were working. And so now what I want to do is a little activity with you to show you why the improvement can be very fast and dramatic. You heard earlier that I said, when I talk to students, I tell them, I don't care if you made a 30 on the first test, you can make 90 or higher on the next test. And this little activity is going to show you why I so firmly believe that. So on the next slide, there's going to be a series of words or short phrases, and they all have vowels in them. And I'm going to give you 45 seconds to count the vowels on the list. Now, if you finish before 45 seconds are up, then just go back, recount them, because I want you to give me exactly the correct number of vowels. But we all have to stop at 45 seconds, and I will give you the 5-second warning. Is everybody ready? Okay, so let's start counting the vowels now. Five seconds. And stop. Now I would like to know how many of the words or phrases you remember from the previous slide. And we're going to use our eye clickers to tell me. Okay, I'll give us a few more seconds. Oh, we still have 100, okay, 12. My goal is to still have 100 of you in here at the end of the session. I don't want any more people who've left than that. Okay, so let's see what we came up with. And, okay, yeah, ones and twos, between 2 and 5. And usually when I do it, I just kind of poll the audience, the average is about 3. And so I'm going to say our average probably was about 3. And so we didn't do very well on that because there are 15 words on the list. 3 out of 15 is what percentage? 20%. What letter grade is 20%? I call it F minus. I love this visual. I saw that, yeah, F minus. So we didn't do very well. But I want us to look at the words again. And if you look at them from top to bottom, you're going to find that they are arranged according to something. And as soon as you see what they're arranged according to, if you haven't seen this, because I've done this at Michigan before, so only if you haven't seen it, and when you see what they're arranged according to, then just yell it out. Numbers, exactly. Dollar bill for 1, dice for 2, tricycle, 4-leaf clover, hand, 6-pack, 7-up, etc. So now I'm going to give you 45 seconds to memorize the words or phrases. And this time when I take them off the screen, I want you to just close your eyes and silently recite them to yourself. And now we're going to do an iClicker question. You're going to tell me how many you remember this time. So start memorizing the words now. Five seconds. And stop. So now just close your eyes and silently recite them to yourself. And when you think you've remembered as many as you're going to remember, open your eyes and indicate with iClicker how many you think you remembered this time. Oh, thank you. Wow. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. So if anybody hasn't voted, if you want to vote quickly, and we'll see what we did this time. Wow. Okay. And so what you can see is 13 or more, 47%. Okay, so 6 to 8, 9 to 12. Great. Now, did everybody get at least 3 times more this time than you got the last time? Okay, so that's proof positive that you could have made a 30 on the first test and 90 on the next test. Typically, the average the first time I do it, if I'm not using clickers, is about 3. The next time it's about 12, 13. So it goes from about 20% to 80%. Now the purpose of this activity is this. We're not any smarter people in the room now than we were 2 minutes ago when our average was 20. And just as we could go from 20 to probably this group was maybe 87 or higher if we looked at the average, our students can do the same thing. But there were 2 major differences between the first and second attempt. And what was one of the differences? Okay, what was one of the differences? Yell it out. Okay, the focus, yeah, I think they said we knew what we knew what the task was, absolutely. And that plagues a lot of our students. We knew what the task was this time around. The way that impacts our students is they don't know what the task is. When we tell them we want you to read this information before you come to class next time, they think the task is to have their eyes fall over every other word while they're texting and on Facebook, when what we mean is we want you to read this and be prepared to lead the class in a discussion on this information. When my chemistry faculty members at Southern University, my undergrad school, when they gave us homework problems to do, I thought the task was to turn in the problems done correctly. So that's what I did, use the examples. But that wasn't the task they had in mind at all. The task that they had in mind was that we would understand the concepts that these problems were about, and that we could not just work those problems that were for homework, but we could work any problems that related to that concept. Now, I can't go all the way back there now, but if I could, I'm pretty sure I would have done something differently had I known that. I would have worked more problems. I would have focused on what the concepts were that the problems were testing. But I didn't know that. I thought just get the homework done, turn it in, got A's on it, thought I was doing well. And so students have to know what the task is. And what was the other major difference? Okay, strategy or structure, exactly. We knew how the information was organized. And that's really important. That's a cognitive science principle that whenever the brain is trying to learn something new, it's always looking for structure, it's looking for organization. And so in our classes, if we can help students identify or at least be aware that they need to be looking for the structure and the organization, it makes a big difference. Now, as you heard, I didn't know much of this stuff before I came to LSU. And again, you know, I'd been teaching 30 years before I got to LSU. I started learning it about 2 years after I got there, but literally teaching 40 years before I really believed in it, because at first I didn't think this would work. I really didn't think that in one session you could teach a student what they needed to do to totally transform their academic experience. But then I became a believer because I would tell a student this, and maybe 3 weeks later I'm walking across campus and this student is yelling out, Dr. McGuire, Dr. McGuire. I speak up, hi, how are you doing? I'm doing great, I'm making an A in that class now, and I was flunking it before. And initially I would say, oh wow, that is fantastic. Now tell me, exactly what did I tell you that you're doing? But then, you know, now I trust in the strategies and I tell them students much more enthusiastically. And so that's why I want you to start getting the information from students. But this book, How People Learn, was very instrumental. It was put out by the National Academy Press back in 2000, and it's been so useful that now you can get a copy of it. If you just Google this book, you can get a free PDF copy of it. But it had a lot of information in there about metacognition, about learning strategies, because we know a lot more about learning now than we did in the past. We know that active learning is much more lasting than passive learning. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here because you're engaged in active learning because that's who you are, that's what you do. But again, students will not benefit from our active learning strategies if they don't know the investment that they have to make in it. We know that thinking about thinking is very important. Teaching students about metacognition, even using the word metacognition, is extremely important. And we know that the level at which learning occurs is important, and that's where Bloom's taxonomy comes in. And so this is the form of Bloom's that I like to share with students. Some people don't like the triangle form. And when Bloom and colleagues developed this back in 1957, he was a cognitive scientist, psychologist at the University of Chicago, they didn't intend for it to only be a hierarchical structure. But I like it like this because I like that the base of this thing is remembering. You do have to know something. I have so many more students now telling me, I'll say, you know, there's certain things you have to know. And they'll say, oh, no, Dr. McGuire, back in your day, y'all had to know stuff, but we can look up everything on Google. And then I have to tell them that you cannot solve problems with information you've just looked up on the web. And this came home to me. Our older daughter is a faculty member at Baylor College of Medicine, and sometimes, well, she's an administrator now, but she was rounding with residents, and she said that one day she was rounding with this group of residents, and she asked this young man, is it okay to prescribe drugs like Sudafed and Actifed to pregnant women? And she said what she thought he was going to do is stop and think and say, well, it constricts blood vessels, so probably not. Instead, he whipped out his PDA at the time, called up the physician's desk reference, read a few lines, and told her no. And she asked him why. He was absolutely clueless. And so this has permeated itself up into the best med schools, professional schools, where students think they don't need to know anything. But the base of Bloom's is knowledge, remembering. So there are certain things that you just have to memorize. And then above that is understanding. So if you're just at memorization, if I asked you if I said, what is a buffer solution? If you said a buffer solution is a solution that resists a change in pH, you're absolutely right. But then if I ask you, well, tell me that in your own words, how would you explain that to your 80-year-old grandmother or your 8-year-old nephew in words they understand, using examples and analogies from their life? If you could do that, you're at understanding. If you can't, you're just at remembering. And then if you could look at problems and answer questions, work problems, answer questions you've never seen before, you're at applying. If you could take any concept, break it into simpler concepts, And so if I asked you to give me a 3-minute mini lecture about buffer solutions, you could come up and you could talk for 3 minutes, and you could tell me about the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, you could tell me about the common ion effect, you could tell me why weak acids or weak bases are important to start with rather than strong acids. Then you're analyzing. If you couldn't do that, then you're not there. If you're evaluating, if I gave you 2 buffer solutions and asked you which one is going to be more effective at holding a solution at a pH of 5, you could do that. Or if you had 2 ideas, 2 theories, you could tell whether one is more likely to be accurate or more has a stronger base. And if you're creating, you can come up with your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own ways of doing things. And again, when I share this with students, the impact is, wow, I really wish I had known this before. And so, let's see, I need to advance this first. Yeah, when we tell them, they get it. And so I want to ask you, because I speak to students all over the country, and I ask them to think back to high school and indicate the highest level that they typically had to operate to make A's and B's in their high school classes. And I want you to tell me what level you think most of them say. Okay, and we're just about there. Let me see if you are like the students. Yeah, 1s and 2s are basically the numbers that they say. Okay, and now I didn't go into this in detail, but I typically don't talk to students about this information until they've gotten back the results from their first test or quiz. Because if I start talking about learning strategies and they haven't gotten the first test or quiz back, what are these students thinking? I don't need that. Maybe she's talking to all the other dummies in the room, but I don't need that. But when they get that first test or quiz back, we have their attention. And so they've been in college for a while. And so then I asked them, okay, I'm going to show you the data. 1s and 2s, this was in 2008, 2013, big bump was at 1, 2014, but basically 1s, 2s, and 3s. Now, I want you to, when I say, yeah, okay, let's go back. When I asked them, now that you know what the University of Michigan is like, now I want you to indicate what's the lowest level you think you're going to have to operate to make the A's at Michigan that you are totally still capable of making, but what level will you have to operate? And yeah, I started it, okay. And so I'll see what you think students say. Okay, and I do have to tell you, I'm very metacognitive about everything that I do right now. And so I was supposed to go from 10:30 to 11:50, but I actually started this about 6 minutes and 20 seconds after 11:30. And so I'm going to go a little bit longer than that. I'm going to be around all day, so we might not have exactly 5 minutes for a Q&A, but I'm going to be around all day, so if you have a question, you can ask me. Okay. And so let's see what you said for that. Okay, yeah, the big bump was at 4. And what you're going to see is that with the data from classes, I got to click in here, and then, okay. Okay, yeah, the big bump was at 4 in 2013. In 2013, did I do 2? 13? Okay, how students answered, yeah. It's 4, and in 14 it was 6. And so the point is that when we teach students Bloom's taxonomy, they're able to see that they were operating at lower levels in high school than they need to operate in college. And that's the recognition that we want them to have. And so how do we teach? So that's the third piece of the puzzle. They're flunking not just because they're not capable, but they were in study mode and not learn mode. They were working to make A's on tests instead of preparing to teach the material, and now we see that they were at lower levels of Bloom's. How do we teach them to move to higher levels? We teach them something that we call the study cycle. Very powerful tool. Students love this thing because how many of you have heard students say, well, I just don't really know how to study? Students say, yeah. And they always, not always, but often they'll give a reason. They say, well, I just don't know how to study because, and what's the because they say? Exactly. I never had to. And so when we give them this tool, it makes a big difference. 5-step process: preview information before you go to class so you prepare your brain for learning. Go to class. You have to be there. And you have to be there in mind and not just body. And if you've done the previewing and come up with questions that you want the lecturer to answer for you, you can stay with the lecturer. And then as soon after class as possible, you got to review what just happened in class that day. And the example that I give as proof of that is movies. How many of us here have ever been to a movie, any movie, more than one time? Okay, how many of us have noticed that the second time around, you see stuff that we didn't even know was there before? Absolutely, and students say the same thing. I said, and that's what the review will do. When you review stuff that happened in class, immediately after, your brain is going to see concepts. It's going to see connections that it didn't know. And also, you will have questions that you didn't totally understand that you can talk with the professor about. And then it only takes about 10 minutes if you do the preview and review efficiently, and so you got to do more than that. And we showed them how to structure what we call these intense study sessions. Set aside about an hour, take a minute or two to set a goal for what you want to accomplish, and then study with focus and action for about 30, 40, 50 minutes. Now, more students these days I'm seeing are coming with ADHD, and so they can do shorter sessions. You can do a 10-minute session, set a goal for a minute, study for 8 minutes, review. But the idea is to show them how to break it up, do a reward, and then come back and review what they've just studied. And we suggest that if students can do 2 or 3 of these during daylight hours and another 1 or 2 at night, they will have studied for 4 to 5 hours that day. And most students don't study that much in a whole week. And it really makes a huge difference. And this is from a student who was not using this. He said, I'm not good in chemistry, and my grade is reflecting that. He wanted me to tutor him. I spent not 1 nanosecond tutoring this guy, but these were the grades that I spent just 1 session with him, 1 50-minute session, and these were the grades after. And the email he sent me said he ended up earning a 90A in the course, but he started with a 60D. And he said that what he thought he did differently was he started to make side notes in each chapter in the book. He wasn't even using the book before. He didn't even know there was a book for the course. And the reason he didn't was because the book was on the syllabus as optional. And he knew he wasn't going to do optional, and so he didn't know there was a book. But I had him get the book, and so he started using it, and he was making side notes in each chapter. And as he progressed on to the next chapter, he was able to refer to those notes. He says, I would say that in chemistry, everything builds from the previous topic. Who knew? Now, I think that his professor probably thought that he had kind of gotten that idea by April of a course that started in January. But our students won't get this unless we take them through this. And so I won't read this, you can do it, but these are the ones we need to share with students, some effective metacognitive strategies. And just a minute on why using eye clickers. And as you've heard, this is the first time I've ever used eye clickers. That's the other thing about this metacognition stuff. It gives you more self-efficacy than the law should allow. You think you can do anything. They said, can you use eye clickers? Sure, I can do eye clickers. What are eye clickers? But there's a good reason to use it. Everybody can be engaged, even if you've got a large lecture session. It really does facilitate this peer-to-peer interaction if you ask questions that they have to discuss. We used it to track attendance. We were using Turning Technologies, as you heard. You can identify student misconceptions, and students can answer and be anonymous, and so they're not afraid to say what they think. Helps them identify their own incorrect thinking, and it boosts their confidence when they get a question right. It's like, yes, and confidence, I'm going to talk about this in the motivation session later on, but self-efficacy is the #1 determinant of how much effort you're going to put into your information. Most students like them, we find, because they are anonymous. There's this real-time interaction with the teacher. Extra encouragement to come to class, because if you give points for participating using clickers, and it really is an active way to learn the material. You can find those sticky points before the exam, and you have more students awake break during more minutes in the class. And just quickly, and I promise I'll be finished in 3 minutes, but I just wanted to show you what happens when we can teach this to a whole class. We've been talking about individual students, but we taught this in general chemistry, and we only did it after the first test. And you see on the first exam, the folks who were there that day, 71.65 on the first exam, the ones who were absent, 70.45. Now, the other thing I said, we do it after the first test, but the other thing is we don't tell students that the next day somebody's going to talk about learning. Because if we tell them that the next day somebody's going to talk about learning, what happens? Nobody's going to show up, exactly. But you can see that the students who were there went up to 77, the ones who were absent went down to 69, full letter grade difference. And we published this work in the Journal of Chemical Education. In the spring of 2013, you can see that there was a 2-letter grade difference from this just one session. And in spring of 2015, I didn't go in until after the third exam. And here you see the people who were there had a lower D average than the people who were not there, but still a letter grade higher at the end of the course. And the big difference you can see is in the final course average, but then the exam 4 difference, and in one of the other slides, there was a big difference in homework. So students see why they need to start taking homework seriously. The discipline-specific journals now are interested in publishing this information, and these are just a couple of other examples that you can see later. These are some of the changes that faculty have made, providing learning strategies information to students after test 1, having them determine their learning styles. Oh, how many of you know that learning styles have fallen into ill repute lately? Yes, okay. So I put that in the book. I put the study that allegedly debunked learning styles, but I put the study that debunked the study that debunked learning styles. And that's, because I've seen it be very, very useful with students. We call it learning style preferences, but, and I say in the book, it may be a placebo, I don't know, but placebos work. And so if it works, then why not use it? And then there was a University of Connecticut professor. She did it in 20 minutes, and she saw great results. Knowledge of metacognition greatly increases the success of minority students and low-income students because they're much less likely to have been cognitively challenged in high school. They did great in high school, but typically it wasn't as challenging as some of the other students have been, and more likely to experience stereotype threat, and they're more likely to interpret initial failure as a sign of their inability to succeed, and they're more likely to be talking with faculty who tell them that you're not going to be able to succeed. And then when they see that, no, I can be in control of this, it makes a big difference. Mindset, this is the work of Carol Dweck. What she saw was that your view of your intelligence will determine your actions. If you think that you're born smart or not, then you are not going to put forth a lot of effort, and that's what I'm really going to talk about a lot more in the breakout session. There's a study that links faculty attitudes on intelligence to student success in STEM. When students were in the class of a professor with a fixed mindset, the gap was twice as big as when they were in a class with a professor who had a growth mindset. And in our STEM program, you can see this. We totally eliminated the gap between the underrepresented minority students and other students. This is another program, and it was funded by NSF. And so finally, I'm going to end telling you about this student. This was a graduate student. At LSU, they have to pass 6 cumulative exams the first 2 years, or they're kicked out of the PhD program. This poor guy had passed only 1 his first year. And so I would not have been able to get anybody at LSU to bet me a dime that if he only passed 1 his first year out of 8, he could pass 5 out of 8 his second year. But he started working with the Learning Center and the Writing Center. And so then that next year, he didn't pass 5 out of 8 exams. He passed 5 out of 7. And he passed the December exam with the highest score in the group. And this is he, Dr. Algernon Kelly. Take a good look at this guy. He's the only person I know on the planet who has a PhD in chemistry. His is in analytical chemistry. And he started every single college course at the remedial level. Courses you don't even teach at the University of Michigan. But he was able to get his PhD. And so he started teaching at Xavier University in New Orleans when he left LSU. But now everywhere he goes, he teaches this. He's teaching in upstate New York now. And again, I said, students, send your emails. This student wrote on October 17th, I'm struggling, I want to succeed, but everything is just ending up with a decent grade. So he was making C's. 1 week later, hey, Dr. Kelly made 84 on my chem exam compared to 56 on my first one. Then November 3rd, this email. And you notice the change in his mood. Goes from, hello, Dr. Kelly, hey, Dr. Kelly, hey, Dr. Kelly. Increased my bio exam from 76 to 91.5. Ever since I started using your study cycle program, my grades have significantly improved. I've gained a sense of hope and confidence. And that's what we want our students to have. That's what they lose when they have that first series of failures. And so metacognition works. 2 final reflection questions and we're out of here. Yeah, you can do it on this. Oh, and I'm sorry I'm going over time, but you people are so much fun. Okay, yeah. Who do you think that students is primarily responsible for student learning? The student, the instructor, or the institution? And I'm sorry, I'm going to cut these off pretty quickly in the interest of time. So when we get up to about 95, I'm gonna cut it off. Okay, and let's see what you said. Okay, yeah, typically the students will say the student, and that was your big bump. But if I asked you, I'm sorry, no, oh, interesting. No, the question that I should have asked is, oh, okay, yeah, who's primarily responsible for student learning? And most of you said the student. Okay, so then the next question is, and the final question is, who do you think students say is primarily responsible for student learning? Okay, and I'm going to cut it off now and see what you said. Yeah, the instructor. Yeah, they say, well, if they don't teach it, I can't learn it. And so I said, yeah, but okay, but if your learning were 100% your responsibility, is there anything you could or would do differently? They kind of think and go, well, yeah, I guess so. And I ask us as faculty, if our student learning were 100% our responsibility, is there anything we could do differently? Yeah, and if we ask our institutions the same thing, the answer would be yes. All of our institutions have some policies that are not the most conducive to student learning. So the bottom line is that when all 3 of these entities take full responsibility for student learning, that's when we're going to see a significant increase in equity and excellence for all students. In conclusion, we can increase student learning, but we got to teach students how to learn. We have to make the learning visible. We can't judge their potential on their initial performance, and we can't let them do it either. We have to encourage them to persist even when they fail initially, and we've got to encourage them to use those metacognitive tools. These are some additional references. This is the Teach Students How to Learn, which is the book for faculty. This is the book we wrote for students. Teach yourself how to learn. Thank you very, very much.